Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where we live in our open and welcoming community. We live our message of love, hope, justice, and joy. We extend a special welcome to any visitors this morning. We're glad you're here, and we invite you to stop by our welcome table after the service in Robinson Lounge. We want to get to know you and answer your questions. Again, welcome to our congregation. We're really happy that you joined us today. We do have a few announcements this morning. Come beat the heat with the Rainbow Ministry at their annual summer picnic. Our friends at the Bayard Rustin Center are graciously hosting us for a potluck at their space on 12 Stockton Street, Princeton, on Saturday, August 5th from 1 to 3 p.m. Feel free to bring any meat-free items you like, hang out with your friends in the congregation, and check out the Bayard Rustin Center's mission. Okay, and now for our chalice lighting. And you can all help me, especially kids who might know the hand signals. We light this chalice for Unitarian Universalism. We are the church of the open minds, the helping hands, and the loving hearts. Together, we work together to care for our earth and work together for love and friendship in the world. About that. I realized that. A place that would have values and so we went church shopping, which meant walking through the yard by Protestant churches. I vividly remember being in a service in a but not surprisingly, the program sermon. As soon as we got in the car, I told Jim I just can't do this. I attended this love at first sight. I was at home among our spirit of life. I had never felt so connected. Roots still makes me feel joy. So thus began a new kind of Sunday morning for our young family, which soon grew to include our third son, Dan. In those days, at least one parent had to help teach the children's classes, and so I spent most Sundays downstairs in a classroom. And they learned about our faith by teaching it to kids. We always started with checking circles, and still do, where the kids and teachers would share the highs and lows of their week. Sometimes big things came up in small ways, like when a pet died, or a child found a way to help a friend, kind of like Frog and Bird in the story. One of the most helpful lessons for me was learning the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism with second and third graders. And if anyone's new here today, I'm pretty sure there's a brochure with them out in the lobby, and it's also on the church website and the congregation, or the association's website. I think I taught this curriculum 3 different times, much raised with my children, so I remember most of it by now. But little did I know that by talking about these principles with third graders, I was building a foundation that would serve me in my own life and in my career. My husband told me last night that when he heard the first principle 30 years ago, he was sold on the UCP. And that principle is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That provides a powerful North Star. And there's another principle that has really helped me at work. So in 2019, I was working with a bunch of partners to come up with solutions to risk of lead in drinking water for children. The first principle affirms this goal. Every child should have safe drinking water. No one could disagree with the goal. But to accomplish it, our group agreed that a new law was needed that would require all lead pipes to be replaced in 10 years. And it wasn't so easy to agree on whether that was actually the right approach or how to do it. It got very complicated. Each different group saw the issue through their own lens, important lenses. They faced different technical issues and political constraints. And they included the owners of drinking water systems, whether municipal or large privately owned water utilities, the state's regulatory agency, the ratepayer advocate, community activists who knew that lead in paint poses a greater risk than lead in water, mayors, legislators, the governor. But the fourth principle helps here. It is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. In our third grade classes, an elephant was used to explain what this meant. And many of you know the ancient story of several blind men feeling different parts of an elephant. The tail, the trunk, the flank, the ear. Not one of them could perceive the full animal or even know it was necessarily an animal until they spoke to one another. Crafting a lead pipe replacement law was very similar. Each of the stakeholders seeing a different part of the problem. And only by creating a space where each could share their perspective and listen deeply to others could the problem be fully understood. Then the group members could craft a holistic solution that would work and that they could support, and which was indeed signed into law a year later. So children in the audience, and I see a couple of you here, you should know that when you're in a class downstairs in the faith development program, your teachers are learning a lot beside you. When we learned together about the first principle, I gained the confidence to work on difficult problems. When we learned together about the fourth principle, I learned a new way to solve those problems. And when we have sharing circles, and you talk about your highs and your lows of the week, we learn about each other, and we learn from each other. Thank you.
Sundays to Unitarian Universalist congregations in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Vermont for many years. I am mostly following on Sundays now from my dad's kitchen, where I tune in on YouTube. But it's good to be with you. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers, and we sort of changed the order of service a tiny bit here. So I would like to do a pastoral reading, and then Asher, if you wanted to play. Okay. This is a poem included in a book that Naomi Shahid Nye put together called 25 Poets Under 25, Time You Let Me In. And this was published in 2010, and Naomi was here in Princeton at the Stewart School introducing this book. This poem is called Membership, and it's by Nicole Gunther. I take off my hat on the walk down to the park because it feels like a church, and I want my head to feel connected to the sky, and I realize it is a church. It contains my religion. The trees, the birds, the air so smooth into my lungs. This is my take off my hat because the creek tells me to. In its silky, constant voice, it says, "You are in this church, you beautiful being, you little person." I take off my hat and do not speak and say, "Yes, I am a member of this church. I am this small, important nothing. I listen to the wordless sermon delivered by you, creek preacher." This congregation breathes together, and I take molecules into me, and carbon dioxide whooshes out of me, and the plants surrounding me return my oxygen. This is why my religion is so hard to explain. People say, "What do Unitarians believe?" And how can I say, I have faith in connection and the power I felt standing on the edge of that cliff when I was 13, and the thunder of waterfalls, and eye contact, and words, and changing the world, and keeping the world the same. Will you join in the words printed in the order of service? We bless the world with hope, love, justice, and joy. May these gifts help our congregation bless the world in the same spirit, bringing to neighbor and stranger the gifts of our lives and faith. Here in the Falconer. One morning in May, Senator Chris Murphy spoke on a news program about the article that he and the neurologist and ethicist Ian Marcus Corbin had written for the Daily Beast. The title is "The Left Needs a Spiritual Renaissance. America Does Too." One of the news hosts remarked, "Yes, it would be good if more people went to church." If you heard that, you might have also said to yourself, maybe it depends on which church. Right then, while I was listening to that, the phone rang. It was a scam call, but it got me to the bookshelf in my dad's house where I had placed an issue of Life magazine that I had brought over, the cover announcing a special series, a crucial U.S. debate on our national purpose. The date, May 23rd, 1960. Later that morning, I saw a message from Bill inviting me to lead the service here today. I responded with thanks, yes, I'd love to. There were many wonderful things about being a student at Princeton Theological Seminary, and as difficult as it was for me to leave my friends in the beautiful mountains and lakes of Vermont, where I had lived for almost 13 years. I went to seminary because I had been working as a support person for the county counseling service, and one morning while driving a client to her psychiatrist's office, she told me that the phrase God the Father and any suggestion of a male God had always been terrifying to her. It didn't occur to me at that time to say, well, God has been misgendered for a couple thousand years. And I hadn't yet learned and therefore could not cite the original Hebrew in Genesis that states that Elohim, the gods, made the humans in their own image Seattle, I applied and was accepted to Princeton Seminary. Even though growing up I had gone to a Presbyterian church and in Vermont sang in the choir at the Congregational Church, by the end of my 3 years at seminary, I had been told by some classmates that I was a heretic, which is okay because heretic means one who chooses. One student in the dining hall said, "You're not a Christian, you're a Unitarian, a Universalist," not knowing the history of Universalism. And another said, "Well, you're a Unitarian." I graduated in 1987, and that September, my curiosity overcame my shyness, and I visited this congregation. A few months later, on a wintry morning, walking over here from my one-room apartment on Chestnut Street, I don't remember what it was. Some question, some lack of purpose, maybe a misunderstanding. Something was making me tired. As I crossed 206 at the light, I said, "Things fall apart. The center cannot hold." Moments later, I found a seat in the front row of the back section back there where I thought people would sit if they needed to fall asleep or if they were easily distracted, so that's where I belong. Looking down, I saw the floor dampened by my puffy boots. Then I looked up as the minister, Edward Frost, began his opening words. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. I don't recall how Edward Frost included Yeats's poem, The Second Coming, in his sermon that morning, and though I felt tears in my eyes, I also felt called into this community of people whose principles, actions in the face of injustice, whose critical thinking and acknowledgement of life's mysteries, whose kindness and welcome assured me that together we were at home and were standing on solid ground. In case any of you have heard yourselves recently saying those words by Yeats, "The falcon cannot hear the falconer," or "Things fall apart, the center cannot hold," or "The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity," you'd probably concur with Fintan O'Toole's Yeats test. Quote, "The more quotable Yeats seems to commentators and politicians, the worse things are." Things were indeed dismal in 1919 when Yeats wrote this poem. World War I had just ended. Violence and governmental upheaval continued in Ireland. The Russian Revolution was 2 years in with a long way to go. And Yeats's wife, Georgie Hyde Lees, was stricken with the Spanish flu while pregnant with their daughter, Anne, who was born a month after Yeats finished his poem. Yeats removed specific references from the poem to make it more universal. 20 years later, he received a letter in which a close friend wrote about a German pacifist who was incarcerated by the Nazis. Yeats responded, "Look up my poem, The Second Coming. It foretells what's happening now." It's likely that your thoughts about this poem are more clear than mine. The apocalyptic chill has been felt by every generation for the last 100 years, and yet we're still here today. The rough beast, if it intends to bring about the end, has not yet reached Bethlehem. Or perhaps the rough beast is that part of human nature that saves us from ourselves, and though tired and dismayed, could come live in us again, just in time. In 1960, the editors of Life magazine must have thought things were falling apart enough to publish a series of essays about our lost American purpose. In the introductory article, John Jessup asks, what happened to the American dream? He goes back to the end of the 19th century, citing the great causes Americans saw in themselves and in their mission to the world. Democracy, individual liberty and free enterprise, pluralism, and morality, where he quotes Emerson, who said, the universe is moral. Jessup mentions Teddy Roosevelt, who said there are higher aims than increasing one's personal wealth, who spoke of the responsibility of the individual citizen, and who said, quote, the rights of the people had to be freshly earned every day. Jessup discusses Lincoln and Whitman, then lists the four purposes he proposes for the new era, the 60s, the first of which, because of threats to our national security and the dangers of military weapons, was survival. The next purpose was the promotion of self-government by peoples of the world. Third, moral law, where he says democracy works only if and because the people have higher values, and he quotes our nation's fourth Chief Justice, John Marshall, saying, our very right to self-government is derived from the laws of nature and of nature's God. A series of essays was published over the following weeks, beginning with the playwright, former Assistant Secretary of State, and then English professor at Harvard, Archibald MacLeish, and former Illinois governor and two-time Democratic candidate for president, Adlai Stevenson. So a few of MacLeish's words, he says, quote, we are prosperous, we have more stuff than Louis XIV, but something is wrong and we know it. The trouble seems to be that we don't feel right with ourselves or with the country. It isn't only the Russians. It is ourselves, how we feel about ourselves. We've lost our purpose. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is the American dream. The dream is real, in spite of the fact that its practice is still a delusion and numerous pockets of hypocrisy across the nation. MacLeish writes that human freedom is continuously evolving and that a nation moves toward it as, quote, a ship moves on a compass course toward a constantly opening horizon. And then he closes, Americans seek the freedom to think for themselves, speak for themselves, govern themselves, pursue happiness for themselves, and so become themselves. I had known that Adlai Stevenson was a Unitarian, and I have a little book that records the controversy that arose in the fall of 1955 when Stevenson, while governor of Illinois, joined a Presbyterian church where he lived in Lake Forest. Stevenson's father was Presbyterian and his mother was a Unitarian, and he had participated in both religious traditions as a child and had become a member of the Unitarian congregation in Bloomington, Illinois. Some Unitarian clergy were displeased by his move of joining the Presbyterian church, and many Presbyterians, lay people and clergy, were outraged that a church with clearly stated doctrine would receive a non-Trinitarian into membership. The controversy was aired in national magazines as the minister of the Lake Forest Church, Presbyterian Church, Reverend Robert Andrus, tried to calm things down for his dear friend Adlai, who was in the midst of his second campaign as the Democratic candidate for president. There were other pressing issues of the day, but this became the big news. Talk about the falcon not hearing the falconer. In his 1960 essay for Life magazine, Stevenson said that we need multiple loyalties: family, work, religious community, neighbors, clubs, etc., as a way to expand our horizons, not just a single loyalty to party and state. He said that we need to reassert the primacy of the public good. Our fear of communism and out-of-control defense spending was making us less generous in domestic and international aid programs. After all, this is a quote, after all the cheap sarcasm about bureaucracy and creeping socialism, we need a positive change in mood. We need to support education, the arts, and science, not just because the Russians have photographed the other side of the moon. He said, the pursuit of truth is itself the highest human activity. We need to restore compassion toward all people. The goal of peace requires controlled and supervised disarmament. Truth makes us free, and if we can insist on reality as our starting point, we are ready to move forward to the firm purposes worthy of our past. 2023. The article by Senator Chris Murphy and Ian Marcus Corbin, published in May, "The Left Needs a Spiritual Renaissance, So Does America," talks in bleak terms about, quote, rampant consumerism, economic inequality, feelings of emptiness, and loss of community. The authors name leaders whose vision had been grounded in spirituality and say that we need leaders to bring Americans together, leaders like Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., Gandhi, and Chavez. We need leaders like them. The authors of the article write, most versions of spirituality, of whatever tradition, tell us that what really matters is goodness, compassion, harmony with nature, self-discipline, mindfulness, holiness, the virtues, etc., rather than just money and power. A spiritual vision can show us that we are not enemies, but indispensable co-workers in this life. And here we might ask, is there something or someone calling us back to our dream regarding life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Is there something today that says, now? One afternoon, when my daughter Johanna was in 3rd grade, she told me that a student on her bus had said, "You're going to go to hell because you don't believe in God." She paused and said, "Mom, it's not that I don't believe in God. It's just not the one they talk about." I asked her, "How would you describe what you believe in?" She responded, "Well, I believe in the Holy Spirit of Mother Earth." And I said, that's all you'll ever need. At seminary, one of my Old Testament professors taught that the ancient Hebrew religion was first and foremost a religion of place, of the land, and that only later was driven to speak out against the growing powers of kings and governments. We know that indigenous sacred stories are all about remembering, with respect and gratitude, our relationship with the holy in nature, which is all of nature, matter, spirit, and life. Much of human history is about people having to leave their homelands. Most of our ancestors and so many of this generation have experienced the grief of leaving their beloved land, escaping empire's harsh and greedy control, seeking safety, food, and shelter, seeking religious freedom, or having been sold long ago, or more recently, into slavery or servitude. Some ancestors arrived and let their grief become fear and desire for wealth and power. They forced those who lived here to leave. Remembering our own histories, we can offer our welcome now, offer a home, and new connections with this land to people who are now fleeing their native lands. Can we say to others, be with us here. Mother Nature is here too. Of course, at the same time, we're experiencing excessive heat, flooding, smoke from wildfires, ocean temperatures near Florida at dismal and dangerous 98 degrees. A meteorologist in Iowa recently received death threats for saying that climate change is the cause of the record-breaking heat. I wonder, amidst all of this, could there be a convergence of our national purpose and a spiritual reawakening related to the land? Could addressing climate change, care of the land, waters, and air become our national purpose? And could that restore our hopes for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Instead of private conquests for power and profit, we could turn and humbly ask teachers who have known for millennia to tell us how to be caretakers of the forests, the waters, the animals, how, when, where, and what to plant. Can people of faith find the place at this time of climate crisis where science's quest for truth and the acknowledgement of our real and spiritual kinship with nature meet? In 1969, we were nearing the end of a decade in which dreams were shattered and so much fell apart. But you might remember where you were on this day, July 16, 1969, watching Apollo 11 with Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins aboard, taking off and heading to the moon. In that spirit of adventure and wonder, I'll read in closing a letter written by Marion Carpenter, a chemist, to his son Scott, an astronaut in NASA's Mercury program. This letter was written on May 23, 1962, the eve of Scott's mission to orbit the Earth. Dear son, just a few words on the eve of your great adventure for which you have trained yourself and anticipated for so long, to let you know that we all share it with you vicariously. to you at the outset of the space program, you are privileged to share in a pioneering project on a grand scale. In fact, the grandest scale yet known to man. And I venture to predict that after all the huzzahs have been uttered and the public acclaim is but a memory, you will derive the greatest satisfaction from the serene knowledge that you have discovered new truths. You can say to yourself, this I saw, this I experienced, this I know to be the truth. This experience is a precious thing. It is known to all researchers in whatever field of endeavor who have ventured into the unknown and have discovered new truths. You are probably aware that I am not a particularly religious person, at least in the sense of embracing any of the numerous formal doctrines. Yet I cannot conceive of a man endowed with intellect, perceiving the ordered universe about him, the glory of the mountaintop, the plumage of a tropical bird, the intricate complexity of a protein molecule, the utter and unchanging perfection of a salt crystal, who can deny the existence of some higher power. Whether one chooses to call it God, or Muhammad, or Buddha, or turquoise woman, or the law of probability matters little. I find myself in my writings frequently calling upon Mother Nature to explain things and citing her as responsible for the order of the universe. She is a very satisfactory divinity for me. And so I shall call upon her to watch over you and guard you, and if she so desires, share with you some of her secrets, which she usually is so ready to share with those who have high purpose. With all my love, Dad. May the voice of the falconer, Mother Earth, be heard all around the world, and in answering her call, may we always be grateful, helpful, hopeful, and bold. Amen. All blessings and amen.